All right. Hey, everybody. This is Alexa, and I'm here with Natalie, and we are having a conversation about burnout today. Strange thing to talk about, but strangely relevant for these times. So, Natalie, why don't you get us started?
Yes, I know this is kind of an intense slide, but this is sort of what passion and burnout each feel like, right? Passion is that fiery excitement we get around something, and burnout for some of us may feel like we are completely underwater with so many different things on our plates. And especially now, perhaps more than ever, when we are being expected to do so much and take on so much. There's a lot of pressure on us to be our best selves, and to maintain that passion all throughout everything that we are doing. But that's actually really difficult to do. And it's difficult because we're human, and it's really difficult to be our best at every single moment during the day. And part of what Alexa and I are going to be talking about over the next few slides is how we can start humanizing the difference or the dichotomy between passion and burnout, and how we can acknowledge that we all need support sometimes, and maybe get a little bit better about recognizing what that looks like for us and asking for that support.
Absolutely. And we want to do it early enough. And I'm finding that in these weird times of all of us maybe working in a different way, passion and burnout go even more hand in hand because our work and personal lives are oftentimes blending. And the things we're passionate about, oftentimes we're passionate about work and passionate about our families. And those are all mixed up in the same place. So burnout can loom even closer than it might have in the past. Natalie, we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about some of the different signs of burnout. And what we have here is, if you draw your eye around the edge of some of those different signs. And I was wondering, do any of these sound familiar to you?
It's funny when you first asked me the question, I was like, how does burnout show up for me? And it's really helpful to have some words to think about. And some that jumped out immediately for me were neglecting my own needs, kind of in line with that difficulty with healthy habits. For me, when I am working a ton, and I'm a parent of two stepkids. So when we are focused on family and focused on work, I have a tendency to push what I need and my workouts, and maybe choose a meal that is less healthy, when I normally would have something that would make me feel better and nourish my body more. I have a tendency to kind of push those things to the bottom of the priority list. And as a result, that one at the top, feeling ineffective, jumped out at me too, because I feel like for me, it shows up almost in a cyclical way. So I deprioritize myself. I deprioritize the healthy habits that I know make me feel good. And then as a result, I feel ineffective. And that's just a tough place for me to be. So that's sort of how it shows up for me.
Well, that's so fascinating. I think, you're not alone. I think a lot of us tend to just kind of push through. And that leads me to the one in the lower right-hand corner. For me, I try to go into denial for a little while. And I'm like, oh, if I can just do one more thing and help this other person, then I'm beating it. So, my similar cycle starts with me with denial. I don't even acknowledge the burnout. I just am like, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to push through. I'm going to do one more thing, even if that means missing my workout or, missing my meditation session that I know is good for me. But those things make me think I'm going to feel effective. But at the end of the day, after several cycles of that, I end up feeling very ineffective, just like you. And at that same time, you never feel like you're doing enough. You just feel like you can't catch up.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some that really resonate with me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this thing, burnout? Some people might have thought it was kind of a fluffy thing, but the World Health Organization has a point of view.
It's a real thing, and it is a big deal. So I know, mental health awareness is a conversation that lots of organizations are having, and for good reason, because of exactly what we're talking about. So much of with how things are shaping up in our workplaces and our home is blended together. And what the Health Organization has said, even before COVID-19, was that this is a syndrome and it's conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And I think that last part is really, really critical. The other thing that the World Health Organization said, and I'm going to double check my notes here so I can make sure I get it right, is that it's characterized by 3 dimensions. First is feelings of energy, of depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And the final is reduced professional efficacy. And that's sort of what we were just talking about, where we have this feeling of ineffectiveness. So those are really the 3 distinguishing qualities that they talk about with regard to burnout. And it is a very real thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you clued in on this not successfully managed. And I think that gives me a little bit of hope because we do have agency to successfully manage it. But it's important to start with awareness and realize, are we that match that's kind of burning out there? So because 1 in 5 of us are headed for burnout. And oftentimes it happens to be the folks that are the go-getters, the doers, the people that have the most passion behind something because they take on more and they do more and more, and they may just try to put their head down and push through. But the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and the FAST Foundation did say 1 in 5 employees is 1, highly engaged, and 2, at risk for burnout. So what does that mean to you? Well, burnout leads to all kinds of things, including health problems for each of us. So starting with us individually as people, we want to be our best self. And then for businesses, that can lead to issues on their balance sheet. Gallup actually did a poll of employees who said they experienced burnout at work, and the implications were pretty dire. For instance, if you're burned out, you're 63% more likely to take a sick day, 23% more likely to visit an emergency room, and 2.6 times as likely to leave your employer. And generally getting less joy out of work. The joy is then squashed. That passion turns to a burnout match. And we think it's important that we all feel joyful in our jobs. And that can have bottom line implications and real life fulfilling implications as well. I loved this quote because I think when you opened, you were saying burnout and passion are 2 sides of the same coin. And John Gordon has a quote here that says, we don't get burned out because of what we do. We get burned out because we forget why we do it. So maybe tapping into that original passion might just be a key to help us get away from that burnout funk. Natalie, I'd love for you to give us some thoughts about what we can do about it.
Yes, I love that. I like to give you a little takeaway action item so y'all can start putting this stuff into practice in your own work and lives. So part of what we're talking about here is raising your own level of self-awareness. That's so much of what developing leadership skills, working with others, understanding how we can be more effective in our work and in our life is all about. So in an effort to become more self-aware about what either ignites our passion or causes burnout for us, we would encourage you to take a look at some of these sample characteristics of burnout. See if there's anything on this list that resonates with you. Which of them do show up with you? How do you acknowledge and express them? And when was the last time you actually shared this with someone else? So take a look, jot down the ones that actually resonate with you. If it's not on this list, jot it down. And the second part of this activity is to share it with someone either in your personal life, a friend or family member, or a colleague that you work closely with, to be proactive and get ahead of these burnout conversations. Because when we are so passionate, when we are working so hard, and when so much of everything is muddled together, it's really critically important that we take the time, sit down with the people who are close around us and say, hey, I'm trying to do my best, but because I'm human, sometimes my best is not always going to be perfect enough for me, and it may not be perfect enough for you. And when I start getting burned out, here are some things you can look for to help keep me in check and keep me honest with taking time for myself so that I don't get burned out.
Yeah, I have someone that says you got to name it to tame it. And I think speaking it out loud immediately starts to put it back in the place where it's not so overwhelming. So Natalie, I think those are great pieces of advice. And I'd love for all of us to go out and give them a try and see what happens next. Natalie, thank you so much for your spending time chatting with me about burnout. And this was really fun.
Yes, thank you.